Hello, I'm Bas Hamer from PossumLabs, and today I'd like to talk to you about who we built the PossumLabs DSL project for. It's for organizations that want meaningful tests for existing applications. So, when we talk about existing applications, they can have different ages, but in the worst case, we refer to those things as legacy applications, and they can be over a decade old. But to get working code in a legacy application or any application, we need a couple of the same things. Right? The developers have to understand what to do, and they have to execute it correctly. Because if they don't execute correctly and make mistakes instead, you end up with bugs. Now, we figured out that if you do TDD, test-driven development, you will actually catch most of those bugs. Now, if you have developers who make mistakes and they didn't really understand what to do, you're going to catch it with Agile. Right? Agile has frequent demos, so people can only go off the rails for so long before it's caught. But this last category, where people executed correctly, but they didn't understand exactly what to do, that is the category that you're really worried about in legacy software. And that's one of the reasons why the PossumLabs DSL project was built. Now, if you're dealing with new software, you know how to solve this. It's BDD, behavior-driven development. But behavior-driven development is a process. It's a methodology that starts before you start developing. And sometimes you're decades too late. And I want to be really clear about this. This is not a path towards BDD. BDD is a methodology. It requires your entire team to be engaged, you collaboratively write requirements, and then you start doing implementation. The DSL approach, domain-specific language, is a tool. You can do it by yourself. It doesn't require the rest of the team to be involved. You first design a language, then you write tests in that language. Right? And it's very important you take the time to design the language, otherwise it will become very hard to maintain. And the PossumLabs DSL project bridges the gap between Gherkin as a BDD tool, which it was intended for, and Gherkin as a DSL tool. And the gap is in a couple of areas. First, test data management. Gherkin does not have a concept of entities. Yes, it came from domain-driven design, but domain objects really aren't part of it. It really just focuses on the ubiquitous language, where it doesn't really have a concept of domain objects. And it also doesn't support really dot notation, right? It's really focusing on English language, whereas we really want to bring it closer to a coding language by having dot notation. Dot notation is the idea that you can refer to properties of objects using a dot. And this also means that there's very few reusable, shareable components. Because if you grab a library that comes with chunks of language, and you want to integrate that with another library that has chunks of language, there really is no good way for them to share data. And that's the part that PossumLabs DSL ends up trying to solve. Now, can you use PossumLabs PossumLabs DSL for BDD? Maybe. I've never tried it. It's not really been a concern I've been faced with. Most of the times when you're doing BDD, you will not run into the problems that PossumLabs DSL is trying to solve. Right? When you are building test cases for a large existing system, you're probably looking at having to support hundreds, maybe thousands of test cases in a relatively short amount of time. These are not the problems you're trying to solve with BDD. And BDD, chances are you're putting a lot of effort into your quality up front, right? Because you are choosing actively during the design of this new product to value quality. With legacy systems, that's probably not the case. So you really need different types of tools and methodologies on how you approach testing these systems, knowing that you're going to have the occasional large swaths of tests that are going to start failing when certain changes were made. So let's take a quick look at what exactly is going on in the following videos, and we'll start talking about how we actually do this data management. Thank you for your time.